I spent over 25 years believing that I was lazy, and I wasn't. And by the time the right questions had been asked, that word had already done more damage than the original problem ever could. So if that sounds familiar, stick with me, because today I'm talking about what being called lazy actually does to a person. And not just the feeling part, but the actual damage. The part that indicates how you show up in every room for the rest of your life. I'm going to walk us through a little bit of what the research says, but also touch on what we already know in our hearts, because we live it every day. And if you're somebody who has been asking yourself, like, what is wrong with me? I want you to be able to leave this video with a better question. If you're new here, my name is Jasmine. I'm your local idea barista. I am not a therapist or a clinician of any kind. I'm just here to have conversations with people that have big ideas and loud brains. So first things first, being called lazy is not just feedback. That's an identity wound. And here's what I mean by that. There's a huge difference between somebody saying, hey, the dishes aren't done. That's about a thing versus why are you so lazy? That's about you. Those two sentences feel very different in our bodies, and they show up different ways in our lives. Researchers who study criticism call it the difference between behavior-focused feedback and person-focused criticism. Person-focused criticism, the you are kind, is more likely to hit a person's self-worth, induce negative self-talk, and have them avoiding whole situations as they come up. When somebody calls you lazy, they're not just making a comment about a task you didn't finish, they're making a personal judgment about you, and your brain files that away. Now imagine that happening twice, a dozen times, by a parent or a teacher, your boss, your partner, yourself in the mirror at 2 a.m. What you end up with is not just hurt feelings, you end up with a whole story about you, about who you are and what you're capable of and whether or not it's even safe to keep trying. That is identity damage, and that's why I'm making this video. What often gets called lazy is really just struggles with executive function. Do not get scared off, stick with me, because this is often the point where people get their light bulb moment. Executive function is essentially your brain's management system. It helps you with starting things, follow through, planning, organizing. It helps with emotional regulation, and it all runs in the background, right? CHADD, C-H-A-D-D, is short for the children and adults with attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. They often describe executive function as your brain's coordinator. And for people with ADHD or any other condition that affects your executive function, your coordinator is essentially running with like spotty Wi-Fi. But here's the part that nobody tells you. From the outside, executive function struggles can often look like you don't care. So if you're having trouble starting or with follow through, you're lazy. If you are forgetting steps, you just weren't paying attention. Or if you get overwhelmed and you get stuck, then you've given up. But on the inside, it's loud. And it's loud because you really are trying. You're just trying against a system that's giving you constant friction, and the people around you can't see it. By the way, I am not trying to explain everything away. I'm not trying to give anybody a free pass. What I am trying to do is point out that the labels we have either put on ourselves or we've put on ourselves is oftentimes wrong. And you can't solve a problem that's labeled wrong or that you can't see. If the label is, I'm lazy, then the solution probably is work harder, try harder, feel worse. And we all know how that works. But if the label is, I struggle with starting, you've got something that you can work with. Because now there's not a closed door. It's, I have trouble with this, and therefore I need help or I need support. In order to do this, I need this. Repeated criticism becomes your inner voice. I'm going to present to you a sequence, and you let me know in the comments whether or not this feels familiar to you. Somebody says you're lazy. That becomes, I'm behind, which could become, I'm always behind, which becomes, I'm broken, which becomes, why even start? Before you know it, you're not even dealing with a hard task anymore. You're dealing with a whole belief system that has been placed upon you potentially because of someone else's assumptions about what you should be able to handle and what you should be able to do. By the way, the research on adult ADHD backs this up. Studies on internalized stigma, meaning stigma you've absorbed about yourself, is linked with lower self-esteem, higher psychological distress, more functional impairment, and a lower quality of life. And a 2024 systematic review in the Journal of Attention Disorders found that adults with ADHD consistently score lower on self-esteem measures than their peers. And I want to say this clearly. This does not mean that any of us are worth less. It means that many of us growing up were told, one way or another, that we were. The outside label became the inside script, and the inside script became the default setting. So if you find yourself saying, I am just so lazy, I would like you to stop for a second and really evaluate, is that coming from you? Or if you're hearing it in your own voice, did it originate with you or did it originate somewhere else? I'm willing to bet that it did. Shame is not necessarily going to help you perform better. And this is an important one because there's this persistent myth that, especially with productivity advice, that shame can be motivating. If you just feel a little bit worse about yourself, then you'll get your shit together. That's not exactly how that works. Shame does not necessarily make you show up more. It could make you show up less. And this is where we get things like chronic procrastination, perfectionism that looks like high standards, but is actually just fear of being seen, over-explaining every time something goes wrong, people-pleasing, not asking for help when you're actually drowning, going quiet on projects that actually matter to you. These are not character flaws. These are protection responses. Your brain and your body, your nervous system is trying to protect you from the next verdict. And the cruel joke is that from the outside, it looks like all of these things are proof that you actually are lazy. That original label was actually correct. It is not proof. It's a spiral. And spirals are wounds doing what wounds do. In my opinion, the way out of all of this is more accurate language, not harsher judgment. If you are someone who's been stuck in this for a while, you may start to think that the only way out is to be tougher on yourself. Harsher judgments, more discipline, stricter consequences. That, to me, is not a way out. It's a spiral wearing a different outfit. To me, the way out is honesty. Accurate, specific, non-moralized honesty. Instead of asking, what is wrong with me, we can start asking, what exactly is hard right now? Because what is wrong with me is just a loop. There's really no real answer to that. But what is hard right now actually leads somewhere. Hi, my mic crapped out, so we are finishing the video the next day. Maybe what's hard is that you don't know what the first step is. Or maybe your environment is too loud. Or maybe you're exhausted and no amount of willpower is going to change that tonight. Maybe it's hard because the task actually is so emotionally loaded that until you address that, it's not going to move forward. But this is stuff that you can work with. These are things that you can address without hating yourself first. I created a framework through which I think of all of this, and it's called BREW. Because I did barista, you get it. Anyway, it stands for begin intentionally, reflect honestly, explore playfully, and work with warmth. 4 moves that you can come back to no matter where you are in your project, your season, or even your spiral. We'll go deeper into brew in future videos, but for right now, I would love for you to just walk away with a warmth. Girl, what? Hold on to the word warmth. Because I feel like that's what a lot of us need more of. We don't necessarily need more discipline or more shame. We need more warmth. We need to be kinder to ourselves because we don't build self-trust by being called lazy or by shaming ourselves. We build self-trust by figuring out where our frictions lie, what support we need, and how can we move forward without the shame. So I'll leave you with this. If you have been called lazy and that word has been running your inner monologue for years, you are allowed to put that down. You are allowed to ask questions. You are allowed to find out what is actually going on. The problem may be very real, but the label is not. If this resonated with you, I would love it if you subscribe and stuck around. I make videos every week for like-minded people that have big ideas and loud brains. We don't take ourselves too seriously here, or at least we're not trying to. We're just trying to have real conversations and create community. By the way, if you're curious about why your planners and your tools always stop working, check out the previous video. See you next time.